Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt
With me today is financial advisor Jodielynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
And Jody and I are doing the show just as co-hosts today. We don't actually have a special guest. Our guest had to cancel out at the last minute, but that's okay because we like doing these shows. These are fun.
Yeah.
We get to kind of just, spin it out there and see what we can talk about. That's a lot of fun. Actually, some interesting stuff's been happening lately, Jody. Of course, last week we had a really cool guest, and there were a number of really good guests last week. And yesterday we had a really great guest. Her name is Morgana Ray. And Morgana is very, very successful at helping people with attracting money. She is like, LOA coach to the stars, that kind of thing. And you can tell when you look at her rates, like, oh my goodness, she charges a lot. So, she's really, really good if she's getting that kind of money, right? And it was a wonderful show. She gave a great presentation about what she does. And actually what she does is kind of similar to what you learn in Thai boot camp, which is kind of interesting. But
Cool.
But it had her own really unique and interesting take on it. Anyway, and you know how this is, as often happens whenever we do an episode, usually there's like an after show talk. We're talking with the guest or we're talking amongst ourselves, chatting about things that happened during the show, all this kind of stuff. And that happened yesterday. And as we're chatting, I told Morgana something that I didn't mention during the show, but during the show, now, this Cindy was actually before your time, but she used to be my Wednesday co-host, Cindy Chavez. And Cindy kept coming to my mind. Now, I think part of it is there are some characteristics that Morgana has that kind of reminds me of Cindy. So that may have been part of it, but I couldn't really explain it. And I thought, why am I continuing to think about Cindy? So one of the things I mentioned afterward was that I had this former co-host who was with me for 5 years, who just kept coming to my mind. I didn't really know why. I said her name was Cindy Chavez, and Morgana said, "Cindy Chavez, I know her."
No way.
For years. They've been friends for decades.
Wow.
This is so wild. So I sent an email to Cindy afterward and told her the story, and she was flipped out over it. And she wrote back saying, "You won't believe this. I've been thinking about texting her for the past few days. They haven't even been in contact for the last couple of years."
Wow.
So it was like pure law of attraction. Like everybody was just connected, totally connected to each other. It was like the universe was bringing us all together to communicate. It was really, really cool.
Yeah, that's such a powerful story. And when we start to look at our lives through these powerful connections, you really truly see how the universe has always got your back, is
Right.
always leading you, and it's always divine timing. And it's difficult to see looking forward, but when you look back, it just synchronistically all fits together perfectly. I love it.
It shows how connected we are. I mean, we know that now. I mean, certainly I know it now in that I've learned it over the 10 years or so that I've been doing the podcast, and I've had great teachers teaching me about it. But it's really something else when you consciously are aware as it's happening, because that's what's going on there, right? Oh my God, I didn't know what was going on. It's like, why is Cindy coming to my mind over and over and over and over again? And then for Cindy, it's like, why do I have this strong feeling that I have to reach out to Morgana? There was that source energy connection going on.
Yeah.
It's great validation. It's wonderful validation.
Huge. Yeah.
There's also another cool story that comes out of this too. Now, I can't say this is definitely going to happen. This is a maybe at this point. But Cindy hinted to me she might be able to come back to the show.
Ooh.
And I told her, I thought from the moment that, because you came on in late April? Is that when you came onto the show?
Yeah.
I thought from the moment you came on, I thought, whoa, wouldn't it be great if Cindy did come back and came back to the Wednesday show, because that's the show she used to do with me, and did it with you, because I tell you, you guys would hit it off. I am convinced of that.
I would love to meet her.
Yeah. So, it's far from a done deal, but what she wrote me in the email yesterday hinted that she just might come back. So that'd be really cool. I would love that.
Cindy, come back.
Like I was telling Morgana too, I learned so much from Cindy over the years. And I know listeners do too. I mean, I've gotten emails since Cindy left. She left in February to basically do this other project that she's been wanting to do. And during the years that we did stuff together, we reviewed, well, first of all, she and I reviewed page by page almost every single Neville Goddard book in existence. Wow. So, I mean, severe deep diving, right? And one of the things, there are many things that I love about Cindy. One of the things I really admire about her is, I don't know how much you've read about Neville Goddard, read about his stuff.
A little bit.
Most of his stuff is derived from biblical passages and biblical stories, but he basically retells the whole thing from an entirely different perspective. It's not the Christian story the way you normally heard it. Mm-hmm. It's the Neville Goddard version of it, and it's all very much about it being a psychological drama rather than actual human beings. So there's this whole thing that you have to understand about Neville in order to understand what he's writing. And Cindy is basically a religious scholar without all the letters after her name.
Wow.
Seriously. I mean, she knows, well, she grew up in a Christian church. She converted to Judaism when she met her current husband, I believe. But in between all that time, she studied so many different religions. Like, not just the major ones too, minor ones. She studied Wiccan. She studied like all kinds of stuff. So when we were doing those conversations about the Neville Goddard books, she was throwing in information that was just blowing my mind that really helped to clarify what we were talking about.
Yeah.
So that's just like one little thing that I love about her. So yeah, it would be wonderful if she would come back. That would be absolutely fabulous.
I would love to meet her.
I'm sure you would. I'm sure. I really do think you guys would get along great. I really do. So anyway, there's that. Something else going on too. Now you've already met David Strickle.
Yep.
And David's actually coming back tomorrow, and he's bringing with him a recent graduate of the Taya boot camp, which I've been through and which other listeners have been through and some of the other co-hosts have been through. And so we're going to get the perspective of somebody who just went through the boot camp. We're also, you and I are interviewing somebody on the special segment called the Crypto Skeptic shortly after we record this episode. And that gentleman is also part of the Taya world. He's one of David's earliest contacts. So we got this Taya theme going this week as well, which is really cool.
Yeah, because you were talking about Taya with your guest from last week.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, Taya's been on theme here for quite some time, for like the last year and a quarter or so. It's gotten a lot of play here. Well, more than that, really. Going back about 2 years now, because that's about when David first came on as a co-host, and he was on for about 6 months. But yeah, Taya's been a very talked about thing on the program, and for good reason, because their boot camp is really good. You learn a lot about yourself when you go through that boot camp. It's really quite worthwhile, and we've had a lot of listeners who have gone through it, partly because they just listened to our podcast, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. Changing the world one podcast at a time.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now the interesting thing about Matthew Gardin is the person coming from the Taya world. He lives down under, so he's going to be connecting to us. We're going to be doing it about a half hour after we do this show. He is connecting, I think, from Australia. So it'll be like 7:30 in the morning for him.
Wow. That always blows my mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're connected all over the world. We're literally connected. The internet has made the world so much smaller in a wonderful way.
Mm-hmm.
The other reason that we're doing this is, before I even started doing the Crypto Skeptic segment, I learned that Matthew was into cryptocurrency. And when I mentioned at one point that I was interested in it, I don't remember exactly how the sequence went, but he ended up posting something on his personal timeline about I don't remember exactly why he thinks that crypto is important, or why he is so upset with the fiat currency or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it stimulated some conversation. And that conversation led to David inviting me to join him on David's podcast, where we talk more about money and how do you interact with money from a law of attraction perspective and from a spiritual perspective. So this feels like it's going to be a continuation of that conversation. So it's going to be fun this week. It's going to be
yeah. Oh, wow. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. And you and I are doing 2 shows today, so we have double the excitement.
Yeah, that's right. All the fun on Wednesday. Yeah, it's amazing. And you know what? Going back to something that we started with today, those connections and how we're being divinely led, like, you can really see it starting to happen. Well, not starting to happen, but you're really seeing it in the forefront of what's going on in your life. Like this person being connected to this and that and this. And like, the more you look for it, it seems the more that theme of connectedness is expanding. And And imagine if the world, like how the world would be different if we listened to that, oh, I should call this person or I should go here. If we listen to that inner voice more often
Yes.
that's leading us where, we desire to go, and just let go of the control of, oh, I need to decide and I need to do this, or, all of the preconceived notions that we've built in our own lives of what we have to do or should be doing, and just
Right.
let that go and started listening to what that inner voice is saying and allow it to lead us where we need
It's
to
a
go.
challenge too. I mean, well, we learned that in a big way. The audience learned that in a big way last week when they learned that you're also a channeler.
Yeah.
And when you channel, I mean, I have not gotten to the point where I can do that. But I kind of imagine
Yet.
based on the amount. Yeah, okay. I'm not even sure I wanted to be honest. But but assuming I keep developing, what I do know is that the amount that I have been able to learn how to kind of connect, not that I ever lose your connection's always there,
Yeah.
but kind of notice the connection, shall I say. To the degree I've been able to do that, I've noticed that I get a choice every time. And the choice is, will I notice that it's there? And very often, because we're so used to it, we learn to ignore it or to pretend that it's not there, or we just kind of don't notice it. So it's one of those things when you do start noticing it, it's like, well, yeah, that's an anomaly. So you kind of, skip over it. And then it happens again. Well, that's an anomaly too. And after a while, the anomalies add up. You say, okay, well, maybe they're not anomalies.
Mm-hmm.
But you're constantly kind of fighting the old programming,
Yes.
That old
Yes.
programming that says, ignore all that stuff. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Yeah, that's right. You have this to do and you have this
That's
meeting to be
right.
at and you don't have enough time and la la la. Like it's this whole conversation within your head, especially I think for people, entrepreneurs who are like A-type personality and they got to be like doing, they've
Oh, yeah.
gotten into like this hustle culture and they like bought and paid for the membership. I was there,
Yes.
so I feel like I can say that. It was hard for me to transition over to listening and allowing myself to be in this present moment and act accordingly, respond from this present moment. What do I want to do now? What do I want to do now? What do I want to do now? Because there's so much layering of belief systems, even when it comes to going for dinner or going to see your friend or going on a vacation
Sure.
or anything like that. Like if you're getting the message, no, like I don't really want to do this, or this isn't for me right in this moment. A lot of people have trouble saying no, and going through with that. They end up just going and doing it because they already committed and they
Yeah.
should, and you're going to be a bad friend or a bad whatever.
Mm,
There's all of this conditioning that's on top of it that you have to unpack and let go of to really
right.
start leading with that voice rather than and following that voice rather than following everything else your conditioning has previously said.
So how did you do it? Because in order to become a channeler, that's why I refer to that. In order to become a channeler, you have to really do that let go process a lot more than I've
Yes.
managed to do so far. And you did it. So that's how I know. How did you do that?
Hmm.
Do
Stages.
you even know?
Stages. I think it's easier as a channel when you're in the channel. So to tee it up, when I channel, I actually have a ritual that I go through. Like I burn sage and I clear the energy, and then I put up the corners, and there's like this safety mechanism around it. And then I imagine going to this specific room, and then I have a specific way that I call in the beings that I channel. So the Abundance Consciousness Council is what I call them, AC Council. They're the ones that I channel. And what I've been told from them is they are like one step above Ascended Masters, and they're like special teams. They're here to support me in my divine mission in life. So I call them in, and when I do this, my only intention is to talk to them and have a conversation. It's like sitting down with someone else. You sit down for lunch or coffee or whatever it is, and you're there to be in that moment with them. So I find it super easy to listen to what they're saying because I'm paying attention to them. Now, when I close the channel, I can still talk to my higher self, like everybody else has access to their higher self to be guided and have that gut guidance as well, which I think are two different things. But that's the difficult one to listen to because it's almost softer, and it comes out of nowhere. Like all of a sudden you'll have a thought or an idea, call this person, do that. And I don't know, like I can only look back and tell you what I noticed on how I did it rather than
That's fair.
intentionally doing it.
Yeah.
I noticed it with my brokerage business when I would call people. So in my brokerage business, they taught me to make a list of all the people you know and then call them and tell them that you're now in financial services and whatever. There's a whole script towards it and everything else. And they would tell you go from the top all the way to the bottom and don't skip people. Like this is very essential. And I guess I'm a bad listener because I would look at this list. I would have this whole list or like binder full of like contacts, people I met, people I knew, acquaintances, like, the hot market, the warm market, the cold market, everybody in between. I had this list of people. And instead of going from the top to the bottom, what would happen for me was somebody would pop out. Their name, a story they told me, something about them. And I would get this little like inkling. Ooh, I call it my spidey sense. My spidey sense would go off, call this person. And I would just follow it blindly. Okay, I should call this person. And then I just kept doing it. Oh, call this person. Oh, call this person. I had it to the point and still do, but so dialed in with that, what we were just talking about, that I would have clients who would think about me. They would need something or they have a question or they were just thinking about me. And then boom, I would think of them too. And I would follow that. I just started following that and putting the importance on that first. The most important thing in this moment is to follow that feeling, where to go, turn left, turn right, whatever. And I remember years ago, a client said to me, I had called him. I thought about him while I was on vacation. And I was in like the Bahamas or I was in Jamaica or I was somewhere where I couldn't make a phone call and when long distance was ridiculously expensive. And I was on vacation, but he popped into my mind and I made a mental note, like call this dude when I get home. So a week later when I got home, I called him and he's like, oh, I was just thinking about you or, whatever. And I said, yeah, I thought about you last week when I was on vacation. And he's like, you did? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, I think it's because I was thinking about you. And I'm like, what? And this guy is not spiritual whatsoever, not into the law of attraction, like polar opposite. And he said, I noticed that whenever I think about you, you call me within 24 hours.
I love it.
And I'm like, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that was verification. And I kept getting that verification that I was supposed to be calling this person because it was so effortless. The people that were on that list, when I was following that, where I was being led by that, divine source or the universe or my higher self, whatever you want to call it, that voice of pure light is what it felt like. When I would do that, things would be easy. People would pick up. They would be happy to hear from me. They'd be excited to sit down and see what I'm doing. They'd book an appointment. All of these things would fall into place. So I kept building evidence for myself that this was the right thing to do, that this was my superpower, is feeling into this and using this spidey sense literally like a superpower.
I love that. I mean, first of all, I love that you were willing to trust it that way. I mean, like I have tried doing sales jobs in the past. I never really did very well at them. And when you described how, they wanted you to go through and make sure you never skipped anybody, I could just imagine myself in that scenario. Because the way I'd look at it, first of all, my list would have been short because I didn't have a whole lot of contacts anyway. But I would look at my list and I said, yeah, that call's not happening. No, I'm not going to give that person a call. No way I'm going to call that person. It's not going to happen. I would talk myself out of every single one of them. It's done, right?
Absolutely. That's what happens with most salespeople, right? They're like, I don't want to. Yeah. But I was following it to the point where I would go out, you run out of your regular contacts, like everybody that you talk to in high school and everywhere in between. And then now you're at this point in life and now you have nobody to talk to ish. Mm-hmm. I never actually believe that there's no one to talk to. I believe there's always somebody that needs me. And that belief has served me well.
Sure. But, yeah. You hold that belief that you're going to have a lot of success. No
right.
doubt.
So when I would run out of like contacts on paper, I would go out to meet people. Like, where could I meet people or whatever, right? And I would just set the intention as I got into my car that I was going to meet somebody that needed my expertise and that I could help and whatever. And then I would just start driving And then I would, get the feeling I should go left, or I should go fill up my car, or I should go right, or I should go over here. And I just started following it. And I met the most random people at the most random places, just like filling up gas, and started having a conversation with the guy that was filling up gas on the other side of the gas station
Right.
from me, right? Like, he's filling up right next to me. Hey, how's it going? I'm a friendly person. Have a conversation. And I built incredible relationships
Wow.
with these people. It was divine guidance of
It's
just
divine
go here.
networking is what that is.
Mhm.
Because you were doing networking, but you were using internal guidance to decide who you're going to network with, who you're going to reach out to next.
Yes.
Which is like that blows my mind.
Yeah. And another belief system that was really that is very anchored within my system is that it always works out for the better, and it's always leading me to something. Like, there's always this beautiful exchange that happens. So a lot of salespeople, when they'll go to an appointment or whatever, they try and sell and it doesn't work or whatever, the person doesn't want their thing. Then they focus on, the energy that they spent, the gas they spent, the time they spent, and it was all a waste of time, and it was such a waste. And I refuse to believe that. And that belief system led me to other people. I would believe that, this time was valuable because I made a connection, or, I just said something that impacted their lives, and they'll probably lead me to someone else that will lead me to something that will pay me or whatever. And I remember I did this. I got a referral to somebody. I literally showed up at her house, and she called the company I worked for a scam. I wanted nothing to do with me, even though I sat there for an hour talking to her about her mortgage and getting a better rate and all of that stuff, just how she could do it through her own bank, not even through one of the companies that I could offer her, because we're just a brokerage.
Mhm.
And I remember walking out of there, and I started to feel a little defeated. And I was like, no, it always leads to something. I'm always being led. I refuse to believe that anything like that was a waste of my time. I gave my best, and I always get that exchange in return. I just don't know where it's going to come from. And it doesn't matter. It will come. It always comes back to me in the end. And it's so interesting, that lady who is super against me, super against the company that I worked for, like, she was so negative. She called one of her friends, or her friend called her, whatever. Anyway, she was looking for a mortgage and life insurance. And that lady, who tore a strip off of me essentially in that meeting, she gave her my phone number. And that secondary lady is one of my best clients today.
Really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting. You've also clarified something for me that I've been trying to clarify since I was in my 20s. I couldn't understand why it was I was so bad at sales, and you just helped me understand why I was bad at it. It's not that I was bad at sales. That really was not the case. If I could actually sit down and talk to somebody, I could sell them and stuff. But once again, you helped me understand something that I probably should have been able to figure out, but I'd never been able to figure out. You walked in to every situation believing that they wanted something that you needed, or that you had to offer, rather. You had something that they needed. I now understand. I walked into every situation thinking that they didn't want to have anything to do with me at all. Now, I didn't consciously vocalize that, but I know I have a history of that. I did the same thing with women. I did that for 20 years. I was convinced any woman, I think I told you this, I was convinced that any woman I ever met, before I even met her, was not going to be interested in me. And we talk about self-sabotage. Like, there was no way that was going to turn into anything, right? And that's exactly what happened for 20 years. Well, as I think about it, I did the same thing with sales prospects. I had so little confidence in myself, and I really did. I had very little self-confidence. If you had asked me at the time, I would have told you I had pretty good self-confidence. But looking back, I know absolutely for a fact my confidence was like, way down here. It was really bad, really, really bad.
Yeah.
So yeah, you just clarified for me what I think that's probably the biggest difference.
Yes.
And it makes me wonder, it almost makes me wonder why it is more people in sales don't train on what you just said. Because what you said requires self-confidence, and it would really show very quickly who has self-confidence and who doesn't.
Yes. Well, and I think it's this separation between the known and the unknown. And we could call the unknown woo. but it's just simply energy. It's your energy when you show up. So in our scenario, the one that you were just talking about, me versus you in sales, I would show up with the energy of I'm here to help and they need my help. That's the energy that I was exuding as I had this conversation with them. And the energy that you may have been exuding at that time was they don't want anything from me. I don't know why I'm here. Right.
I wanted to disappear into the woodwork as fast as humanly possible. That's exactly how it felt to me.
And I think that there's a lot of salespeople that don't believe in energy and or don't understand energy or don't know about energy or whatever, don't realize that it's not just your thoughts and your beliefs, but it's also the energy that you're carrying within. And that this is what I teach in More About Money. It's your energy when working with money, when touching money, when thinking about money. All of these things matter because our world is simply a hologram made up of energy. So you're the one casting the picture. What picture are you casting? And is it one that's serving you or not serving you whatsoever?
I'm loving the way that you say that because you're illustrating for me in a very beautiful way exactly why my journey with money has been what it has been. I mean, I've talked, for instance, I mentioned the TIA boot camp. TIA boot camp, you learn to basically look at what your major root transgressors are and move them out of the way for not just money, but for anything, so that you can start being more successful in attracting what you're trying to attract into your life. And that's all good. It's all good stuff. But you're kind of taking me to a different place here. You're taking me to a place of believing, like you said, in energy. You asked, would I have believed in energy at that time? And the answer is very definitely no.
No.
I had no belief in it at all. In fact, I had, at the time, I was in my early 20s when I first started my first real dedicated, serious attempt at sales. And which, by the way, was probably the worst field for me to be in, but that's another question entirely. But nevertheless, I was trying it. And I recall that I had, at that point in time, about 7 years before, I had abandoned the Christian church and done it with a lot of emotional negative energy. I could describe it that way now. Then I would have just said I was just angry with them. And so that was my association with energy. If somebody had proposed the idea of energy to me, that's what I would have thought of. So probably the last thing I wanted to hear at that point was, well, your energy is what makes a difference. Because I would say, okay, I'm done with this. Goodbye. I'm out of here. I would have run away from it as fast as humanly possible.
Well, and it's the things that people can't see. So they're like, oh, well, I can't see said thing, so I can't believe in it. But I mean, you can't exactly see the wind, but you believe in it too. Right? So it's starting to understand that you are influencing situations without ever saying a word. Your energy is influencing and creating the world that you're seeing.
And for some of us, it takes a while to even consider that possibility. It just does. I mean, I'm just thinking of my own case. It took me a long time to even consider the idea of source energy, even after I was presented with it. Like, source energy. Okay, yeah, well, that's a nice idea. And that's as far as I would take it. And that was a big step for me to take it that far. Oh yeah, that's a nice idea. That was a huge step for me. 10 years before that would have been like, source energy, you're full of it. Get out of my way here.
What are you talking about, Willis?
Stop throwing all this crazy crap at me. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Do I look like a woo-woo person to you?
Absolutely. And you know what? It's interesting for as much as I was taught about law of attraction through like business ventures and things like that, the companies that I was working for, they believed in law of attraction on like a surface level. And I think a lot of people are stuck there. Oh, okay. Like I want something, I put it out there and then it'll come back to me, but they're not thinking about the whole picture, which is you. And for me, I had to go through, like I got stuck in my brokerage business at I think it was $150,000 in income. And I was working really hard for it, like really hard for it, 7 days a week, 12-hour days. Like I had time for nothing and nobody unless it was going to pay me. And then when I started to see that I was the one that was creating this life and started to take responsibility for it, my energy was creating it, my actions, my thoughts, my beliefs, me as a whole. not good or bad, just me as a whole was creating all of this. I needed to step back and start seeing, okay, what's going to make a big difference here? And I started with energy. Like, how do I even feel today? How am I nurturing my energy myself? How am I showing up in this world? And the realization for me at that time, which was, now this was probably like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, it was this realization that I was showing up as overwhelmed, exhausted, and anxious. And I could muddle through it enough because I had the belief system and the energy that I was helping people, but I was exhausted all the time. So there'd be times when people would say no to me, and I'd be like, what? I don't understand why you don't want this. And I knew that it had something to do with my energy. I was pushing them away.
But that's big, though. To make
Huge.
that recognition, that's a tough recognition to achieve. It truly is. And I say that from experience because it took me a long time to even know that was a possibility, let alone recognize it.
Yeah. And then the next big like recognition or struggle, I guess, for me was actually doing it, like allowing myself that time to explore myself and explore that energy and give to myself whatever I needed, whether that was sleep or that was, a bath or lighting a candle or saging or going for a walk in nature. I was work. I had the subscription and paid for it in full to the hustle culture. I was there. And the hustle culture says, team no days off. You're doing things, you're working, you work. That's how you get rich or how you get wealthy. And it was killing me. And so stepping outside of that mentality, did not, unsubscribing or trying to unsubscribe while you're still in that environment was difficult because everybody, leadership, whatever, was telling me you're doing something wrong, you're going to fail. Like, I had to have a lot of faith in the universe and God, whatever you want to call it, and in myself that I would be okay. And I think that's one thing that's difficult for people with money and sales and life in general, is that we get stuck in this vibration of being unsafe. And everything is like this anxiety response that throws you into fight, flight, freeze. And you can't operate from there long term, and you can't operate fully from there with your gifts. It's just not possible.
It's interesting you mentioned that safety zone. That's what I'm going to label it, the safety zone, because that was a topic yesterday with Morgana. And she had an interesting take on it. Her interesting take on it was dive into it. Dive into that safety zone. Like, really just dive into it, hook, line, and sinker. Don't live there, but dive into it.
Yes.
And celebrate it. And be glad 100%. That you have it.
Yes. It's not a bad thing. We are so quick to label and judge. This is good, this is bad, when something's not going right. We're like, the world is ending. It's bad. It's bad. Well, it doesn't have to be. That's one perception out of a billion possibilities that exist. It doesn't have to be life-threatening or whatever. And I think the more you try and ignore, or what I found, and I teach my students, the more you try and ignore that feeling of I don't feel safe, the longer it will persist, because it's trying to tell you something. It's a part of your system for a reason. Like, it's designed to keep you safe. So you either have to repattern the thought process around what's making you feel unsafe and feel the feelings and move through it, or else it's just going to keep coming up. It's like a child that cries, like when it's hungry. You ignore it, it's just going to get louder. It's not going to stop crying.
Yeah, especially if it's hungry.
Exactly. Yeah, it needs something. So your system is telling you need something. And maybe that's a breath. Maybe that's just, an opportunity to lay down and sit with your feelings for a second. You don't have to live there. But it's fascinating when you go there without the judgment and whatever. You just go there to feel it and allow yourself to feel it, how within seconds it moves through you. But it'll take days, if not years or months or whatever, a really long time when you avoid it.
It's also a strange thing too, because I found that on the few occasions I've been practicing doing exactly that, sometimes once I work through it, it's gone forever. Other times it recurs. It goes away for that moment, right? Like you said, you work through it pretty quickly, and all of a sudden you're at the other side, like, whoa, what just happened? But it can also recur, and that that I think can be a frustrating experience too. Like, wait a minute, I thought I dealt with that. But nevertheless, like you say, it is a fairly quick experience. I was actually working on stuff like that today. I've been dealing with various things with this gardening business that I run for Louise, and I did some journaling, which I almost never do, but I did some journaling. I kind of did it modeled on what Morgana was talking about, because she had talked about something that was kind of a different take from, say, the Thai boot camp or whatever. The way she describes it is you actually create a persona of, she has like two personas that you create / discover, and she had an interesting little soliloquy on why it's really both that you're doing it. But one of them she calls your money monster, and the other one she calls your money honey. The money monster is the entity that constitutes all of the different ways that you're fighting yourself, essentially, although you think of it as this entity that's blocking you and stopping you and hates you and is doing everything it can to prevent you from having money. And your goal in her metaphorical universe is to slay that monster. And when you slay the monster, then you can allow your money honey, who loves you in all possible different ways and is totally there for you and wants you to succeed and all that kind of thing, to become your new imaginary mentor, so to speak. So you discover one, you encounter that one, you face that one, you slay that one, and then you attract the other one in, and you start developing the new relationship with that new archetype, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the thing that was new about that was the slaying part. In fact, I brought that up during the conversation yesterday. So it's an interesting choice, because most of the teachers I've encountered say, well, you don't really want to fight it. You want to find ways to appreciate what it's doing for you and all that kind of thing. And she said, no, what I found is you really need to slay it. You need to kill that thing. People get better results when they kill the monster. So I'm curious to know what you think about that.
I would want to know first, like what it looks like to kill the monster. Yeah, because I think words are highly distorted. And I think that when the most success that I have had in slaying the monster, for me, is letting go of all of the attachments to the monster, like taking away its power completely. And that has worked, which would be a version of slaying the monster. If you take away its power, you are crippling it. It has no power over you. And I think that's what I would call slaying the monster. And I would agree. And I think other teachers, when they say accepting those things and loving those things, it's on the journey to letting those attachments go and like disconnecting the button, if you will. Some people have to go through acceptance or whatever. Some people, maybe they take a slaying route and they're going to slash it. I don't know what that looks like, but yeah, I find that it's the most powerful. It has been for me when I disconnect the button from that monster. What did she call it?
A monster.
A monster. Yeah. The money monster. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, I tried doing that with the journaling today, and when I got to the point of slaying the thing, I had the same question you had. Okay, well, what does this look like? And I realized very quickly I didn't want a lot of blood. I didn't want to stab it. I didn't want to shoot it. I didn't want to do any of those things. So I developed my own compromise. I combined two literature sources together. I drew from Harry Potter, and I imagined that I had a magic wand. I even created a spell.
That's awesome. I love it.
I created a spell. The spell is Propulso. I'll explain that one in a moment. But cool. I combined it with a literary thing from Robert Heinlein, who was a science fiction author. He's considered the dean of science fiction. He was one of the original science fiction authors. Yeah. And he wrote his most famous book is called Stranger in a Strange Land, which is a story of a mission that goes to Mars, and the only survivor of the mission is a child who is actually born on Mars and comes back to Earth as a Martian, so to speak, because it turns out there is life on Mars, and the Martians basically helped him stay alive until he could come back to Earth, and taught him their ways and so forth. Well, one of the things that he learned from the Martians was how to make things disappear. And the way Heinlein describes it, it's like he kind of just mentally twists them out of reality. So they kind of like implode upon themselves. They twist out of existence and they go to another dimension somewhere. So like it's like permanent banishment. So I combined
That's
the two
cool.
together. I figured I had a magic wand that would twist them out of this reality.
I
So
love it.
yeah, so that's what I did with my monster. I twisted him out of reality. It was fun.
I love it. Well, and I think it all leads to taking the power away from the monster.
Yeah.
You know, like vanquishing them completely. Take their power away.
So when I said
Take
I
their
was going to explain the spell. The spell is
yeah.
propulso, and propulso is based on Latin that basically means to banish. So I banish you is what the spell meant.
Ooh, I would love to hear a follow-up in like a couple of weeks or a couple of months on things that you notice that are different. Because I think that's a key as well as this noticing and acknowledging. It's almost like seeding the new reality into existence. You're paying attention. Your brain's designed to find whatever it's looking for. So if you go looking for how it's changed, like how the slaying of the money monster has impacted, like even just a thought, like, oh, I didn't think this, or I didn't think that, or whatever. Like this is evidence that you've banished them and are creating this new reality.
And I'm probably going to return. This is really unique for me, not unique, different for me. I'm probably going to return to the journaling and do that more and more. And I say that's different for me because I have historically hated doing journaling. I did some during, I've done some during the Thai boot camp. That was like the most intensive journaling I'd ever done. And I haven't really returned to it much since then. I have this aversion to it, and I can't tell you why. I don't really know why, but I have this aversion. But I have overcome it to a degree because I've been able to do it. And I'm recognizing that in this case, it's probably a very useful application for it. So I'm going to try to do some more journaling. But one thing I can tell you for sure, again, tying into another episode, actually 2 episodes that I did with a different guest, has led to me making a rather substantial purchase in the last day. And I'll tell you about it. This guy, his name is Greg. He calls himself Greg the Hydrogen Man, and he's been on the show twice. He was on a week ago Monday as a second visit. His first visit was in May. And this is a guy who, he's a fairly young guy. He developed this very severe medical condition. It was accompanied by a heart condition. He was basically completely incapacitated. Doctors couldn't really help him with anything. They were basically telling him the usual story that you're going to be like this for the rest of your life. You know, it was that same kind of story. Doctors are really good at scaring people. You know that? They're really, really good. Yeah. So anyway, he was being thoroughly scared. But he did some research, and he encountered something in his research that very few people have ever encountered. He found references to hydrogen therapy. And I thought, okay, hydrogen therapy? Like hydrogen? What? What are you talking about? But the more I think about it, the more it does make sense, because when we look at any of the molecules that make up our bodies, what are they? They're carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. So it makes a lot of sense that hydrogen is going to play some sort of role in the body. Well, out of those 2 interviews, I learned a lot from him. One of the things that I learned is just how little the medical community knows about the role of hydrogen in the body. They know a whole bunch about oxygen. They know a fair amount about carbon. There is some research about hydrogen. It's amazing how little there is. It's amazing how little there is. It's astonishing. Well, there are some people who have done research, not so many here in the US, although there are some. They've been doing research on mammals and small mammals in laboratories and so forth. A lot of research has been done in Japan, and he gave most of the research he was talking about was based on that. But the bottom line is he ended up trying to build his own hydrogen developing machine, basically extracting hydrogen from water. And found that it was beyond his capacity. He didn't have the right tools. He didn't have all the right stuff, but he found the company in Japan that is the leading manufacturer of machines that extract hydrogen, and ended up creating a relationship with them, getting a hold of one of their machines, using it in his own life, and his disease was completely eradicated. His heart condition was completely eradicated. That was some 10 years ago, and ever since then, he's been an advocate for hydrogen. So that's what's his reason for being on the program. And he started telling us stories, anecdotal stories, of course, about people who would hear about what he was talking about, and they'd buy themselves one of these hydrogen machines and they start using it. And they were curing all kinds of stuff. They were curing cancers. They were curing all kinds of gut issues. They were curing, GI issues. They were curing like this long list of things. And as he's been looking more and more into the research and learning about the research that's been done, it turns out hydrogen actually plays some pretty significant roles, particularly as an antioxidant in the body. But it's even different from other antioxidants because most antioxidants are like a general what do you call it? The thing that kills off bacteria, penicillin kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Antibiotic.
Antibiotic. Yeah.
Yeah, like a sort of a general antibiotic just kind of wipes out everything, right? And
Yeah.
that's what most antioxidants do. Hydrogen is actually very, very weird because it will go in and just work where it needs to work, and it won't do anything else. It'll antioxidize to the one thing that it needs to go after, and it'll leave all the healthy tissue alone.
Wow. So you bought a hydrogen machine.
I bought a hydrogen machine, and what made me do it, I mean, I don't normally just go out and buy something based on an interview that I do with somebody here on the show.
Yeah.
But the end of the second episode, he mentioned how he got contacted by somebody who had macular degeneration and managed to reverse their macular degeneration. Well, I have macular degeneration.
I don't even know what that is, but it sounds scary.
It's very scary. It leads to blindness.
Oh.
The macula is the part of your eye that the retina uses to focus through.
Wow.
It's key. And if you have macular degeneration, what basically it means is that over time, your central vision, your straight ahead vision starts to black out. So you
That's
essentially
scary.
become blind.
Yeah.
And I am blind in my left eye that way. But my right eye is still holding its own, which is something because I've had this for, I think, about 15 years now. I was trying to remember exactly when I first heard about it for myself. And I think it was about 15 years ago. And I remember them saying that there's no cure for it. There's nothing they can really do. They can slow the progress down with drugs, but that's about the best they can do. There are no surgeries, and you will ultimately go blind, and it'll take about 15 to 20 years. So I'm probably supposed to be blind by now, but I'm not.
Huh.
And I do know I've been doing a lot of my own mental work. The only thing that I can really do, they have a vitamin combination that you can take that helps delay the progress. So I've been doing that. It's a Bausch and Lomb formula that I use. But other than that, there's not a whole lot you can do. And I've just been, celebrating the fact that I can see on a regular basis and, keeping my vibe up and all that kind of thing. And I think it has helped. But I mean, my vision is not good. It's really not good. It's good enough. I can drive, I can read, I can do stuff. But I know it's not as good as it was. And it was never great to begin with, So when he mentioned that it can reverse macular degeneration, I was stunned, first of all, because that goes against everything that modern medicine has to say about the condition.
Yeah.
And secondly, I wanted to know more. Like, oh, okay, now I'm paying attention, Greg. Yeah, I've been listening to you for 2 episodes, but you got my attention now. So he hooked me up with the link, and I placed the order. It's not cheap. It's a $2,000 machine, but I placed the order, and I'm going to be getting it in the mail sometime soon, and I'm going to start using it. And
I can't wait to hear.
I can't wait either, especially since it has so many other things it can do. That's one of the most interesting things about the stories. People would take it for X and it would also help them with Y unexpectedly.
Yeah. It's like a full body thing.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter. I wonder if it reverses just like eyesight problems because I have contacts and I hate
lots of apparently there is evidence that suggests it helps with glaucoma, evidence that it helps with cataracts. I mean, the thing he told me about the macula. So yeah, a lot of different ways that can help with eyesight, apparently. Now, bear in mind, I've also checked into, and he actually talks about this too. I've looked into what the U.S. medical community thinks about it. The U.S. medical community can't agree. That's really interesting all by itself. The National Institutes for Health, they have written stuff that basically says the research on this is incomplete, but it's very promising. It could lead to some really cool stuff for humans. The FDA wants nothing to do with it. And there are a lot of physicians who go out of their way to write articles saying that it's a scam.
Huh.
So you got this range of opinions in a community that is usually uniform, right? You usually don't get that range of opinions. Usually it's like everybody is lockstep on, here's the protocol for this, here's the protocol for that. They can't agree about hydrogen, which is, to me, mind-blowing.
Yeah.
I'm just stunned by that. Because that's just not their usual behavior as a medical community. Usually, they've got all, okay, here's what's right, here's what's wrong. It doesn't matter whether you agree with that. This is what they believe, right? This is good, this is bad, stay away from this, that's okay. No. Now where hydrogen is concerned, and I'm still blown by that because, like I said earlier, carbon, oxygen, hydrogen. Those are the three elements that make up all of the molecules in our body. They know all about oxygen. They know quite a bit about carbon. How could they not know anything about hydrogen?
No kidding. I've
How
never
could they
even
not know that?
thought
I
about
still
it.
don't understand that.
Yeah.
But apparently they know. Well, they know some. It's not like they don't know anything, but what they know is very minimal. It's astonishing how little they know about it.
I might have to look into this hydrogen thing.
I'm like really astonished. So, and in fact, we have for our gardening service, we have an employee who had just joined us, and she had to quit, and I learned it's because she has cancer, and she's hospitalized and she's in really bad shape. I talked to her sister, and her sister said that she's actually expected to be able to recover. It's going to be a tough road for her, but they actually think she can recover.
Wow.
Well, that's really great. So, good for her. I said, but just in case, here are those 2 episodes. And I explained to her what I just told you about Greg the Hydrogen Man, because honestly, we know that there are limits to what modern medicine can do.
Yes.
When you exceed those limits, I think it's important to look elsewhere.
Yes.
Yeah, sure, there are scams out there. Absolutely. I think we all know that. But there's also a lot of wisdom out there.
I think so too, in different forms of medicine, not just the traditional like go to your doctor and get some pills kind of medicine, but all of these other ancient healing things. Like I don't know anything about hydrogen. This is the first I've heard of it, but
I didn't either.
I was having conversations last week about Qigong. And it's really interesting because my dad, he is a redneck cowboy dude, and also like a secret philosopher. Like you sit down with him for 20 minutes and it happens every time where people are blown away with what comes out of his mouth because they don't expect it because he's got cowboy boots on and a cowboy hat. Like they just don't expect the wisdom that comes from him. He's very wise. But as he has retired over the last 4 years, he's gone on this journey of alternative methods of healing and things like that. I don't know really what got him on that, but he started tapping and then he started doing Qigong, and it's similar to Tai Chi, except it has more to do with the energy, is the way that I understand it. But it's circled back around. My other friend was telling me about this lady who healed her stage 4 cancer with Qigong. And like how they had a Chinese medicine, like a hospital in China that focused solely on Qigong. It's no longer there anymore, but how it saved a lot of these people. And my mom is like kind of opposite of my dad, where he'll tell her to do something, or he'll tell her to do something and she'll be like, no, I don't want to do it. And so I went over there last week and she's like, oh, I'm not feeling really great. My blood pressure, and she's got all these things wrong with her. And she's like, my blood pressure is just really high and I'm not really feeling good. And I said, hey, I just heard about this Qigong. And I like winked at my dad and I told her the story about the lady that cured herself or whatever. And then I queued it up on her TV for blood pressure. And then we left. We went and we're doing something with the horses. And we came back about an hour later and it was like a 15-minute or 7-minute Qigong on YouTube. Free.
Okay, so really short.
Really short. Her blood pressure dropped 20 points.
Whoa, that's nice.
Yeah. And it stayed. She did it like 2 or 3 times, in a row, like different days, like every day for 2 or 3 days. And then she stopped doing it. And her blood pressure has stayed in the normal range where her doctor said it should be.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah. So I'm planting the seeds that she can heal her kidneys and some of these other things with Qigong, because she says it, or if I say it, she tends to believe some of these things. So if I can just keep planting the seeds and take her on the journey of healing.
I got to give your dad credit, actually, because I could just imagine saying, I've been telling you that for years. And
Jody? Oh, my God. Yeah. Well, when we left the house, I said, I know you've been telling her to do it for a while, tapping and Qigong. And I didn't know anything about Qigong. Like my dad introduced me to it, told me a little bit about it. And I was like, yeah, cool, whatever. Awesome. I'm not really that interested at this point. And then it circled back around in just divine timing. Here we are again, right? And I said to him when we left the house, I was like, I know you've been saying it for a while. I also know you said that she's super resistant to doing any of it because he's the one suggesting it. So I thought I'd just grease the wheels here, Dad.
Well, that's why I give him credit, because he didn't get his ego in the way. He said, "Okay, I'll take the help. That's great."
Yeah.
And that's really the best attitude. So I give
Yeah.
him a lot of credit for that, because that's not an easy place to get to, quite
No.
honestly.
I agree, especially when it's your spouse.
Yeah, especially with a spouse. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. I've experienced that with Louise. I know she's experienced it with me. And, and,
Mhm.
and, and you know what that feeling is, right? Like, I've been saying that for the last 3 years, and you're listening to this person.
Why are you listening? So, like, it's a hard thing to get over because you're
It
kind of like
is.
struck, like, my opinion doesn't matter.
That's right. Yes.
Ah, you become like white noise sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I think in a relationship, this is where the rubber really meets the road, because what you're really doing is you're basically deciding, am I going to give the other person space to make their own decisions or not?
Yep. And love them either way.
And love them either way. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what the real challenge is. Because when you can do that, then that's ultimately when somebody else comes along and tells them the same thing, and they start listening to it.
Yep.
But until you're willing to do that, you're the one who's doing the resisting. You just don't know it.
Yeah. Well, and you look at it from a perspective, you want to be the one that saves them or helps them, or it was your
Yeah.
idea, so you can feel that pride. And it's all about you, and it has nothing to do with them.
Well, I think it has something to do with them, but you're right. It has a lot to do with you.
Yeah.
And that's the part we kind of skipped over.
Yeah.
Because of course I'm doing it for them.
Of course I'm doing it for them. Yes. And they're not ready for it yet. It takes an art to step back and be okay with that.
That's right. That's right.
Mhm.
Absolutely right. Oh, this stuff is amazing. I mean, we're closing in on the 1800th episode. I think we got about 45 to go, something like that. And even after all those episodes, I'm still blown away at all the stuff that I'm learning. It's just freaking amazing.
There's
Oh, my goodness.
so much. You feel really small sometimes. Or I do.
Yeah, I do.
You know, just wow.
I mean, there are times I've mentioned this before. I love all the perspectives that we get here on the show. And I really do. I love them. But there are some times, like you say, it makes me feel small. And there are times where I just kind of like shut up. Like, I don't feel like I'm even qualified to be part of the conversation at times.
Yeah.
And then I remind myself, oh yeah, you're the coach. You have to speak part of the conversation. Speak up. But seriously, I sometimes feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's an art in itself. It was taking the ego part of that out so you can still participate. Because a lot of people shut down in that realm.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
I'm not smart enough for this conversation. I'm just going to sit on my hands and not say anything. And I find myself taking a step back and listening a lot of times when I'm not sure. But every time that I stop myself from saying something, and I did this with you actually, we were doing our crypto conversation, and there was something that I wanted to say, but I didn't feel knowledgeable enough. I didn't want to look stupid or whatever. And then it was so interesting because I, got the courage to say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. I don't know if it's dumb or not. And we had a beautiful conversation about said thing. And there was value in that conversation. And it was reminding me, even in this public forum, that it's okay to ask questions. Even when you think they might be silly, because there's value. Someone else is asking the exact same question. So I think that's powerful.
That took me a while to learn that one, but that's one of the nice things about doing a podcast. You learn over time just from the feedback you get that other people were asking the same question you were.
Yeah.
Because that's really not part of it. When you get the handbook, and of course there's no handbook. When you get the handbook on being a podcast host, they don't give you anything in the handbook that says everybody else is going to be asking the same question you are. That's not in the handbook.
Yeah.
And yet it turns out that's exactly what's going on. There's somebody asking the same question that you're asking. There's someone who's thinking along the same lines you are. So you have to just be willing to just let it come out, because when you do, you get the feedback that says, oh wow, that was so good. Like,
yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Well, even just the new perspective. My husband was telling me something yesterday, and he's like, I'm just seeing it a little bit different. And I said, no, I appreciate your perspective on the way that you're seeing this situation, because I can only see my own. I can try and step back and see it from somebody else's perspective when I'm trying to do that. And you're bringing a new perspective to light that will help me see the entire picture in a new way, really, which is beautiful.
It is beautiful. Well, thank you for your perspective, by the way. I really do appreciate the perspective you have brought in the last 3 months or so that you've been on the program.
Well, thank you.
It's made a huge difference. I'm looking forward to the next special segment we're going to be doing in about a half an hour. and encourage other people to listen to it. I'm sure it's going to be a really good conversation.
Yeah.
But this has been a good conversation too. So thank you.
Thank you. This is always a good conversation with you, Walt. I do this for the unbridled joy that I feel here with you every Wednesday.
Me too, absolutely. And I'm sure that our listeners feel the same way. So on behalf of the listeners, thanks to both of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for listening.
All right. And thank you to all our podcast listeners for doing exactly that, for listening. Hooray! We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.